video game design. There we go. Chapter 9. I'm going to talk about serious games. Serious games are constructed to provide a purpose of non-entertainment. They focus on instructing, informing, persuading, or healing. So, for an example, a private company may have its own serious game which trains new employees, or there are educational serious games such as Leapfrog that are for children to teach them certain concepts. To start, we're going to go into the history of serious games. Around the 1950s, scientists began researching AI, which they believed in. AI emphasized that a computer could think well enough to beat a human. Around the Cold War, computer games were generally simulators in which they served a role in military, which focused on real-world situations. And around the 1980s, there was an appearance of strategy games on home computers. Now, serious games are really never meant to reach consumers. Serious games more commonly have two versions. They will have an educational edition, which is just for the company per se, or and they will also have a consumer edition, which is then to sell. Around the 1980s, these strategy games appeared for consumers, and the first one being Civilization. So a little backstory to serious games. And we have an example of one on your right, OXO, which was considered as the world's first quote-unquote video game. It wasn't commercial, really wasn't for consumers, but it was just to illustrate new forms of interface design. So this in aspect was a serious game. So as noted, serious games, they do not have, or they're not for entertainment, enjoyment, or fun. That's not their primary purpose, unlike, say, Call of Duty or NBA. It incorporates gameplay into simulations or educational products, but the main purpose, once again, and the main part of serious games, it's not for generally fun. There's also this term edutainment, which are games that are designed to teach in a scholastic setting. If you've taken finance, the business department has some simulators that are for finance, or if you play the stock market game, those kind of fall under these serious games. Stock market game being a simulator. We also have Leapfrog. We also have Jumpstart as edutainment games. We also have we had a game called America's Army, which was a first-person shooter game that was released as a recruitment tool used by the U.S. Army. So the Army used this simulator game, America's Army, to recruit people. Now there are many serious game styles. We're just going to focus on five, one more. Educational, simulation, marketing, advertising, consciousness and change, and health and fitness. So the first one being educational, really game-based learning. They target instruction and education with an emphasis on real-world situation and concerns. They teach players real-world skills. So for example, this Zoo Vet, it teaches players tools and techniques for treating sick animals at the zoo. This is just a screenshot of this game. Now, with serious games and their kind of design, they are often clean and very simple. There's really not much going on with them. Concept and design of serious games are both driven by the product's goal. And depending on your style, whichever of the four, for example, you're going to pick, you want to pick one that matches your game subject matter. So for this Zoo Vet, okay, this would be more educational because you're teaching players how to do something. Second one being simulation. Simulators are games used in training for a number of skills, often used in government and research and in military. A lot of military has first-person shooters as simulators. They build numerous of skills, critical thinking being one of them, and as noted before, they may not be intended for consumers. The focus is the accuracy of the simulation rather than the visuals. You want to really make the simulation as close to real life as you can, and kind of be all very creative and in depth with visuals. That's not the purpose here when we talk serious games. We have marketing and advertising, which you may have seen games that incorporate a brand or a product. Those would be in marketing and advertising serious games. These games are used to provide brand awareness or to persuade players to purchase associated products or services, also known as advert games. You're actually going to play a couple in class. Once again, marketing games, they do have traditional advertisement within the game, or as bookending, and this term just meaning advertising comes before or after the game, depending on how the game is set up. They can be easily reskinned, so what that means is you can have almost the same game, same gameplay, but just change the art. So say we're using a Coke can, for example, I can just change the art and make it Coke Zero, or change the art and make it a Diet Coke and just have it advertising that product. And you can match different brands by reskinning these games. Consciousness and change. These are, or also called games for change. They target current informational or social norms with an emphasis on engaging in some form of dialogue. They're trying to change your mind about some topic through exposure and instruction, kind of change the way you think. These are two examples of games. So we have consciousness and change. We have the other two as mentioned before. And we have health and fitness. These are games that target fitness and health. You kind of see this a lot with the Connect games. If you ever played Dance Dance Revolution, that would be a health and fitness game, kind of goals getting you up off the couch. We have health and fitness games, or also called exer games, which, as I noted before with Dance Dance Revolution, kind of get you off the couch and engage you physically and mentally. It may include workout equipment. It may not. And besides health and fitness games, we also have what's called health games, or games for health. And this is to help with medical purposes. So maybe psychological or physical therapy, maybe physical therapy simulations or games to get you moving areas of the body that you may have hurt. So we have kind of two examples underneath the health and fitness umbrella. Gamification. This is a system of awards and encouragement, and this is kind of separate from serious games. This is used as support for other types of products, which I'm sure you probably have seen these. So for an example, what you see at the bottom is gamification for Foursquare. And what they have is, if you check in, for this example, to Foursquare, okay, you can unlock certain specials in your game. And you may see this in video games that you play now. You'll get ads saying if you like us on Facebook, you'll get an additional 50 coins, or whatever the task may have you. It's really just to make repetitive tasks entertaining by including reward systems in exchange for check-ins or likes or etc. We'll talk about this more in class. Now, digital learning elements, really learners of today and how people learn. First one we have is kind of learners of today. They process information quickly from multiple sources. Number two, sounds, video, and images are processed before text. So, and this is really when you're creating serious games, or you can also go with any games in mind, any games in that matter, you want to keep this in mind. Number three, parallel processing and multitasking. We're not saying here that learners today can multitask well. We actually do a poor job of that through studies. But learners today have an ability to switch focus between several different tasks and needs very quickly. That's what number three is standing for. Number four, information needs to be immediately relevant with learners today. It has to be relevant. Number five, learners today need a system of awards. Players need to know how they are doing. Kind of, once again, I can go with any game. And the last one, learners can adapt to changing scenarios. So digital learners, elements that you want to keep in mind when creating games, serious games or not. Markets. Now, different industries have distinct uses and designs depending on how the games are used and how the results can need to be measured. So if you look at the sectors on your left, and we have each category of each serious game, we can see what they may be used for. So, for example, I'm looking at marketing. They may use advert games as brand awareness. They may use to make the consumer more educated. They may use make an educational game for product information, to kind of learn about a product. For education, they may have a simulation game for historical. All right, I may make a simulation of, say, ancient Rome, and that would fit a historical purpose. For industry, if I want to, I might make a exer game or a health game, and that may be best for a health and a rehab if you're going through physical therapy. So different sectors use different examples or different categories of serious games depending on how the games are to be used. So kind of a chart here just to view on your own. Now, designing serious games, you want to keep in mind and have think of these questions as you're making the games. What skills will be taught to the person? What type of content will need to be included? So what I mean by that is, what do the players need to learn? You want to ask yourself, what's the game's outcome as well? So when they're all done playing your game, what should they be able to do? And what's the outcome? So you know it was successful. Kind of like teaching an example. Continue with design. What gameplay elements will your game acquire? And there's a bunch of elements, especially with serious games, such as reward systems and breaking down of information. So you need to ask yourself, when you make a serious game, what elements do you need to include in your game to make it successful? And then lastly, does the player have a chance to review? Do they have a chance to review how they did? And can they measure their progress? Can they see how they are doing? So questions to ask while you're designing it. These design elements are different than when we looked at mobile games and online games. Now, distributing serious games, they require a lot of extensive pre-production, creating curriculum, creating a GDD, or what's also a game design document, and how we're going to design the entire game, looking at content. There's two main types of serious games. One, or really what they're used for, one being external, in which serious games are there to provide a revenue stream. It's there to make money, okay, that consumers may tend to buy. Look at Leapfrog, for example. That's an external serious game. Or we also have internal serious games, which are really created and made for the private use of companies. A lot of it's using for training purposes, and you are paid as milestones are passed. So instead of building the game and having those costs and then recouping the cost when you make money from consumers buying, payment as a developer is received as milestones are passed. Now, these proprietary, where these games are used within a company or an organization for training purpose, and they'll never see the light of day. So those games will be proprietary towards that company. Usually software based, and they often will be followed by tests. So you might play a simulation game if you're going to be a cashier if you're going to work the register at a company. You may play the game and then you might have a test afterwards in which you have to answer questions correctly. So then, as serious games, we'll talk more about it in class, and that finishes up all the chapters for video game design.